how much we think about the term worship as we are invited to worship. But it comes from, in the English language, the word worth and the worthshipness of you. The worthiness of you. We come on Sundays to be reminded of our worth in the world as individuals, but not only as individuals, also as a community. And the worthiness of this body, this family, this place we call church, and the worthiness that comes to us, communicated in ages past, and the amazing work that has happened in this sanctuary and in the rest of this building and out on the streets because we are who we are. So our invitation now is to know your worth, to know how valuable you are, how beloved you are, and how wonderful you are. May it be so, now and forever. You bring gifts. You'll stand, please. Our hymn is number 19, The Sun That Shines. One of the things Fred asked me to do in this service was to bring you a little bit of our chapel experience. You're getting some of that with images on the screen during Lent here. We use images a great deal in chapel. There we go. This is our chapel promise. I know you can't read it out there right now, but I know what it is. You can create the life of deeper meaning and greater value your heart desires. Help is available. It will take practice. And so we practice on Sundays. And we offer and receive help on Sundays, and we practice throughout the week. And one of the people who's helped us practice recently is Jackie Pullman. This was her week, stepped out in bravery and led us masterfully on trauma, soul, and your body that stores it. So Jackie offers our welcome today.
Good morning. As Andy said, my name is Jackie Pullman. I have been attending the chapel service mostly for about the past 5 years, and I did the same thing about 5 years ago, and it's amazing how much less nerve-wracking it is once you've done it before. I came here when my daughter wasn't a newborn, and at first church was just a place where it was an hour where I didn't have to be a mom, but my relationship with this community has become much stronger than that. The last line of the promise that Andy just read from the chapel community, help is available, is always what gets me coming back to Fountain Street Church. I've gone through several broken periods in my own life, and there have always been people from this community to help me. From dealing with the breakup of my marriage, to bringing my kids to school when I was injured and couldn't drive. It's this philosophy of help that got me to step into this pulpit and to lead the worship service a few weeks ago. Through story, festival, and practice, our community has helped me lead a life that is authentic and vulnerable. Walking through the doors here on Sunday morning to smell coffee, hear music, and enjoy smiles from friendly faces, it is my favorite time of the week. If you're up a little earlier, I'd love to see you in the chapel community. I wish you a week filled with inspiration and encouragement that you deserve. Welcome to Fountain Street Church.
Lent for liberals and other heretics. If you're not one of those, we invite you to become one. Two significant festivals and stories happened this past week. One was the vernal equinox, which invited us, to remember that the sun will shine in West Michigan again, even longer than the darkness, and invites us to reconsider balance in our lives. And the other was the Jewish festival of Purim. So this photo here was taken by one of our Fountain Street members who joins us in chapel, Ginny Makita. She's actually in Israel right now. And so she took this photo at a Purim festival and celebration. It's a great, joyful celebration. There's a lot of noise that happens, and people dress up in costume. So it's based on the story, the Old Testament story of the book of Esther, which is the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention the word God. And it's a celebration, Purim, of the fact that the Jews were not annihilated, because King Ahasuerus was going with his right-hand man, Haman, who said the Jews are terrible and must be eradicated. And they were moving that process forward when Mordecai convinced his niece, well, I'll say to enter a beauty pageant, but it wasn't like we think of as a beauty pageant. In fact, I think that King Ahasuerus' wife, Queen Vashti, was probably not very happy about it, but the king wanted another wife. So Esther dressed up to not appear Jewish and was selected to become one of the king's wives and was able to get an audience with him and convinced him not to kill all the Jews. And so they celebrate this. Of course, we would celebrate it too if we were going to be all killed, and we still live. And any time so one of the traditional pieces is that the book of Esther is read aloud in worship. We could have done that today, but maybe next year. That's also a good Jewish phrase, maybe next year. But they also, whenever the name of of Haman, not the king, but Haman, his right-hand man who hatched this plot, is mentioned in the story, they also all have noisemakers and make all kinds of noise so that we don't have to even hear the name of this person. There are three other primary practices around Purim that I invite us to this week. One is giving money to at least 2 people who are living with poverty. Giving money to at least 2 people who are living with poverty. And specifically, the Torah cites that it should be a half shekel instead of a whole shekel. And so the rabbinic commentators on the Torah ask, why a half shekel? And the answer is that by giving only a half, each Jew realizes that she or he will never become complete unless they are part of the larger community. So if you have a half shekel this week, give it away. If you have 2, better yet. But whatever you have, find a way this week to give some money away to 2 people living in poverty. It might be a friend, a family member, it might be a stranger on the sidewalk down here. It might be somebody who's standing at your car window at the expressway exit. Second practice is, all right, I have slides for this. There's the giving of the half shekel. Second practice is giving gifts of 2 kinds of food to at least 1 person. So 2 kinds of food to at least 1 person. So bring over a casserole, bring over a dessert, bring over some tasty treat to a neighbor or a friend or a family member or somebody sitting with you here in church. Bring food. We're good at that. And, I tried to find a picture, but the third one is a festive Purim feast. But this probably doesn't include you all because it says, which often includes wine or other intoxicating beverages. So you could almost do all 3 things at once. Like bring food to somebody's house who's hosting a Purim festival meal, and then also, maybe there's people in need there that you can share your money with. So that's our Lenten practice this week. We're actually going to have maybe some more to consider later in our morning. But let's join our Jewish sisters and brothers in celebrating this day of Purim. they did that, but it sounded like there were birds up there to me. Something in the bells, or maybe there are birds up there. So when I was planning this service, I enjoy picking out hymns. I really love hymns, love going through the hymnal, and talking today about generosity and money and giving. And so I thought, well, I'll open to that section in the hymnal. So I looked through the beginning. There's section listings for those of you who aren't hymnophiles. In the beginning, there are sections, and it's always at the bottom too. And I don't expect you to follow me in this, but I thought I'd look up. Okay, where does it fit in here? And it says offertories and descriptions. There are three hymns. There is no section on money, no section on stewardship, no section on giving, no section on generosity. Maybe we're uncomfortable talking about money. One of the things that I love about Fountain Street and about this service, and both services we do it, since I've been coming here, is that the money that is collected on Sunday mornings in loose change, as most of you know, but if you're visiting with us, this might be new to you, all the loose change that's collected that isn't designated for your pledge to support the church or otherwise designated goes out into the ministries of the community and the nation and the world. So we collect the offerings here. The Social Action Committee gives out grants that usually end up totaling between $30,000 and $35,000 a year to go out and to be your hands and feet in the world. Some of you know I previously served as executive director of Heartside Ministry, one of the recipients of those grants. There are mushroom farms that are being built in Cambodia, thanks to you. And there's so much good that's happening. And one of the things I love about the way that Fred does this piece is he's not afraid to tell you to get out your big bills. He doesn't say bring out your 50-cent piece and your half shekel and your dollar. He invites us to give our 20s and 50s and $100 bills. I'm going to invite one other thing. I'll be surprised if any of you take me up on it, but if there are liberals and other heretics here. Other cultures actually celebrate the offering. We are really shy, and we prefer nobody saw us put money in the plate or not most of the time, and so we kind of pass it around in the dark. But there are other cultures who actually dance the offering forward. Some of them just walk it forward, and it's really important to look good when you're doing that, because this is the one time, especially in cultures that are oppressed, where I get to be really seen this week. And I also know in those cultures they say that God loves a cheerful giver. So I give cheerfully, whatever it is that I can to support the community. So I'm going to put a basket up front here. Is the choir coming up? No, okay. So I'm going to put it up here on the riser. So anybody, you can actually, I think, dance to this. Well, I don't know. We have new music, so I don't know what it's going to be. But if you feel so compelled to dance your offering forward and to just let loose a little bit as much as we're able as who we are, go for it. We now graciously accept your offerings. Sorry, yes, I failed to warn the ushers about that. My bad. Y'all are delightful. That was really fun. Thank you for being such a game group. I also usually, and I forgot to mention this, but I also usually invite people to touch the offering plate or the basket as it comes by, whether we're offering gifts of money or not, as a way of saying we're offering ourselves. We're offering whatever gifts that we bring to the world and to this community. Our readings today. First comes from Christian Smith, who writes, "The wealth of evidence reveals a consistent link between demonstrating generosity and leading a better life. More generous people are happier, suffer fewer illnesses and injuries, live with a greater sense of purpose, and experience less depression." Our second reading comes from Christian theologian and prophet Walter Brueggemann, who now actually lives up in Traverse City. If you've ever heard Walter speak, you would think that he's a nasty prophet. I mean, he's like a grizzly old man. But if you have coffee with him, he is the most delightful guy. He says, "If you are like me while you read the Bible or whatever sacred text, you keep looking over at the screen to see how the market is doing. If you are like me, you read the Bible on a good day, but you watch Nike ads every day. And the Nike story says that our beginnings are in our achievements and that we must create ourselves. According to the Nike story, whoever has the most shoes when they die wins. The Nike story says that there are no gifts to be given because there's no giver. We end up only with whatever we manage to get for ourselves. This story ends in despair. It gives us a present tense of anxiety, fear, greed, and brutality. It produces child and wife abuse, indifference to the poor, the buildup of armaments, divisions between people, and environmental racism. It tells us not to care about anyone but ourselves. And it is the prevailing creed of American society." From the Dalai Lama, "Happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions." From Anne Frank, "No one has ever become poor by giving." From Winston Churchill, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." And finally, some of you, I imagine, are familiar with this story and have maybe seen it engraved at the Holocaust Memorial in downtown Boston. Gerda Weissman Klein, who's now 94, survived the camps, the death camps. While she was there, her friend Ilsa was with her, childhood friend. They were teenagers at the time. Ilsa ended up passing away a week before they were liberated. In her memoir, she writes this short quote: "Ilsa, a childhood friend of mine, once found a raspberry in the concentration camp and carried it in her pocket all day to present to me that night on a dusty leaf." Imagine a world in which your entire possession is one raspberry and you give it to your friend. I'm going to invite us into a brief time of meditation. I brought our bowl over from chapel. I'll ring it once to start and 3 times to end. I'd invite you to get in whatever position is comfortable for you. Our teachers of meditation often suggest sitting upright with both feet on the floor, but whatever works for you here. I invite you to take a deep breath in, and then to let it all out, all the way out, as much as possible, to get to the very top. Another deep breath in, and continue. Take a moment to think, to call to mind, to feel a gift you were given. It might have been something tangible. It might have been time. Might have been a comforting hug. Remember that feeling. And now take a moment to remember when you gave a gift, when you offered something to someone. Maybe it was to a friend, or a stranger, or a child, or a grandparent. A time when you gave something, maybe it was to an organization or your community. What did that feel like? Welcome you to come back to this space, to be grounded here. In chapel, we would often invite at this point for you to turn to someone you know and share one of those stories. Maybe you can do that afterwards today. I find frequently, and research bears this out, that the stories of gifts given are often more powerful to us individually than the stories of gifts received. This is my friend Rick. He looks like a pretty generous and joyful guy. And when I was young, let's say about 10, which would have made him probably about 30, this was back in the days of erasable markers. This was a brand new thing that you could actually use a pen and erase it. And Rick had one of those, and I was over at his house. We were at a party, and the eraser on his erasable marker or pen had run out. I was like, oh, Rick, I got another one in my pocket. You can have that. Well, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I got a whole package of them at home. So I gave Rick this eraser and thought nothing of it. He thanked me. And a week later, I got a thank you note from him for giving him an erasable pen eraser, like this big, it probably costs 10 cents. And that has stuck with me ever since, that he would take the time to thank me. And that it's that mutual peace of giving and receiving. For those of you who don't know what I do, I'm a professional fundraiser. I'm a major gift officer for the United Church of Christ. My official title is generosity officer. So I get to go around and teach people to be generous. Or steal their wallets. That's usually what people think. I mentioned earlier I was at Heartside Ministry. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would be in fundraising, I would say no way. I knew people who were in fundraising, and I wanted nothing to do with them or fundraising. But when I was at Heartside Ministry, I found the fun and easy part of the job to be the fundraising. I mean, if any of you has a solution for ending homelessness in Grand Rapids, let me know. Let them know. That's really hard work. Working with individuals who are oppressed in all kinds of ways, who are in ill health in all kinds of ways, who are struggling with mental health issues without care available in so many ways, and who are living unsheltered. That's hard. Going and asking people to help with those issues, that's easy. People want to help, and people want to make a difference. And that's why I do this, because I know that you want to make a difference. And people who want to make a difference also need people they can trust to take their money and to do the right thing with it, to report back on it, and to actually change the world. Free the mind, grow the soul, change the world. So generosity is defined as the virtue of giving good things to others freely and abundantly. And it's both a virtue. Some of us are don't you know people who are just generous? That's just like who they are. I think they came out of the womb that way. They're always giving things away. They're the ones who are visiting when people are sick, who are bringing casseroles over to folks. But it's also a practice, and it's a learned behavior. It is something that we can do, that you can fake it until you make it. So just pretend being generous long enough, and you'll start reaping the benefits of it. One of my jobs is to normalize talking about money in churches. We're really bad at it most of the time. And in doing so, we've let down the people we live with. We've let down the people right here. I know stories of people who gather in this place who, like the rest of America, 40% of Americans live on 110% of their income. 40% of us live on 110% of our income. In other words, we're going into debt and we don't know how to manage our money and we're scared to talk about it. Churches have an opportunity there to address that as a community. So generosity is about money, and I put that first because that's what you all think of. But it's also about time, taking a few minutes to help somebody walk down the street and stay dry. In many ways, you offer your time. It's about offering skills. So if you can grow apples, you can offer apples to people. If you can fix cars, you can fix cars with people. If you can do the accounting for someone, you can offer that, or your writing. And generosity is also about relationships. It's about helping people we know and people we don't know, about building relationships. The generosity paradox, I'm drawing heavily on the work of Christian Smith and Hilary Davidson, who are at Notre Dame University and have pioneered work in generosity over the last 2 decades. Previously, there was not a lot of science or social science around generosity. That field has exploded over the past 20 years. It allows me to do my job a lot better. And it's brought up things like this. We know, giving we receive, grasping we lose, right? It's better to give than to receive. By giving away our own resources, we move ourselves towards flourishing. Think of yourself as a tree, right? If a tree doesn't give away its leaves or its apples or whatever it's growing, it's going to die. It needs to be replenished. And this is not only a philosophical or religious teaching, it is, Christian Smith and Hilary Davidson say, a sociological fact. So that's the first paradox, is that it is better to give than receive. We don't usually think that's the way it is. They say, by always protecting ourselves against future uncertainties and misfortunes, we are formed in ways that make us more anxious and actually more vulnerable to future misfortunes. In short, if we fail to care for others, we fail to care for ourselves. I'm actually going to, oh, that one is right there. Perfect. Okay. Oh, good. So what happens when we're generous? What we found is that, and maybe you found this in the meditation, chemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, the endorphins get rolling in our body, in our mind. They not only make us feel healthier, they improve our physical health, and they lead to longer lives. There was a study done of blood pressure and high blood pressure. They took two groups, I forget how many people were in each group, but a fairly large group were on blood pressure medication, and they gave all of them $40 a day for 3 weeks. And one group, they just gave them $40 a day and said, do what you want. The other group, they gave them $40 a day and said, give it away. You have to give this $40 away every day for the next 3 weeks. After those 3 weeks, they studied their blood pressure and looked, and the people who spent the $40 on themselves, their blood pressure was the same. The people who had given the money away every day for 3 weeks had no more need for their blood pressure medication. I mean, it has that kind of physical effect on our bodies. It also has an effect, a feeling similar to doubling our income if we have a subsistence level or higher of income. And even beyond that, people who are generous and who give away more, there was a study by Harvard University of 30,000 Americans in 41 communities. And what they found is that families who were as close as possible, households who were as close as possible in all their characteristics, the family that was generous, 40% of Americans give away nothing at all financially. The families that were more generous actually had a higher income by $375 per year. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're more generous, people want to be around you. They want to hire you. They're interested in being on your team. They found similar numbers when they looked at volunteering on a regular basis or donating blood on a regular basis. So the second paradox is, and I want to quote Matt Bell, who's another author in this area. He says, our culture calls us consumers. To consume means to use up, to devour, to spend wastefully. And he asked, how's that working for us? Consumer is more than a word. It's a worldview. I'm a consumer. I'm the most important person in the world. Life is all about me, my pleasure, my comfort, my happiness. If I'm a consumer, happiness is found in money and stuff. And if I'm a consumer, life is about competition. I'm happiest when I have more than others have and more than I had before. But what the research bears out is that when we give things away, we're healthier, we're more whole, we have less depression, we feel better about ourselves. So the second paradox is, why don't we do it more? Why do we fail to practice the kinds of generosity that actually lead to happiness, health, and purpose in life? So our giving has to be sustained and regular for that to happen. Has to be a practice that we engage in regularly. They found that giving a big bequest or donating an organ, while it's a great thing to do, didn't have a similar sustained effect. I tried to find a picture of an Irish pub and a waitress in an Irish pub that would be appropriate to show here, but I couldn't find one. Because some friends were at an Irish pub recently when one said, it's my birthday. I mean, they were talking. It was his birthday. It's part of the reason they were out. And the waitress found out that it was his birthday. And she said, I'm going to buy you all a round of drinks then. He's like, no, 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 you don't have to do that. And Irish can be pretty direct, I think. She said, you do not get to tell me what I get to do with my generosity. And at the end of the night, she actually sat down and had a shot with them. I guess you can do that in an Irish pub. It has to be sustained and regular. It has to be relational. You know that your money and your gifts and your time are making a difference. One of the things I wanted to look at here is I get an opportunity to travel around the country in my work and visit all kinds of churches. And as I travel around and visit, I tell them about your offering here, our offering here that goes out back into the community, and invite them to practice that. But there's one message that's very, very clear, and that is that successful churches are laying down their lives for others. They are willingly giving up comfort, maybe not without complaining, but they're giving up comfort. Churches that are struggling are unwilling to lay down their lives. Many say they want to, but they won't allow themselves to be changed. The truest form of generosity is to accept the gifts of those we think that we are there to help, to allow ourselves to be changed by those we believe we're serving. Just down the street, 45 minutes, First Congregational Church in Kalamazoo. They had a new pastor a few years ago. He's actually here from Grand Rapids. And he came in and said, you know what? He went to the property committee, which is called the trustees in their church, and said, give me 3 years, and I'll double your budget if you agree to one thing. That we will not charge anyone anything anymore to use this building. And the property committee said, and you're going to double our budget by doing that? We charge rent for all kinds of things. How are we going to make that money? He said, well, let's try it. It only took 1.5 years to double that budget. They saw their church as a community asset, as something that belonged to their city, that is offered free of cost and expectation to any group and any person that wanted to use it. And what's interesting is you change the nature of the relationship. You no longer have a contractual relationship in which the people who are using the building are expecting so much of us as building owners, providers. In fact, you get people and groups who are really surprised, right? They're like, I'm not paying you rent, so what am I supposed to do? Like, we would happily take a donation. And those donations often end up being more than the rent. And more importantly, the church grows in a culture of generosity, in offering itself to the world and to the community. They've doubled their membership. There's a lot of reasons, right? But this is one of them. Doubled their membership and carried out a $3 million capital campaign that a consultant told them before this they couldn't raise $1 million for. When we act in ways that are generous, we also receive generosity both as individuals and as churches. And so I invite us as a church to think about what would happen if we gave our building away for free. What would happen, some people wonder, if we retired the offering plate? I never carry any cash anyway. Send around an offering plate with a credit card swiper or tapper on it, and you might get something. What if we sat down like many of our Jewish sisters and brothers do, with our 1040s and negotiated our giving? Church council up for that? Any takers? Or what if we just started talking about money in a healthy way? And in our community, we're doing great work, right? We're doing incredible things. Some other churches are also doing things like paying off the milk debt at elementaries so their children can be free of that. One of the things I'm so grateful here is that you offer Planned Parenthood sexuality education to our middle school students. Our son Ezra went through that. He's a sophomore in high school now. He's a Planned Parenthood peer educator thanks to you. each and every one of you, and making a real difference in the lives of his friends and the schools that they go around to and do sexuality education. We can do free funerals, free weddings, great music, which we already do a lot of. I'm an interim here, so I just get to stand up here and say these things and invite you to think about them for a long time. Individually, your Lenten liberal heretic practice. Got the ones earlier, but I also want you to think about what's the craziest, generous thing that you can do. Maybe what's one thing that's really, really valuable to you? Could we give it away? What would that look like? How would that happen? Can we go out of our comfort zones to make the world better? Go to places that we're afraid of. We do that regularly in chapel, by the way, and I know you do here too. I'm just not here for it usually. For those of you who have kids and grandkids and who are thinking about your estate and your will and whatever is going to happen with everything you have after we pass on, what could your kids or grandkids or neighbors use right now? What would it be like to give them a gift that would make a real difference in their lives and for you to enjoy it before you're 6 feet deep? It's amazing what can happen. We have 1 month until Easter, 4 weeks, until Easter Sunday and Earth Day. I invite you each day to find your raspberry, to find one act of generosity per day for the next 28 days, and to share that with your family, your friends, your community. You'll be better for it, and so will we all. Amen. Our hymn is number 67. We're invited to stand, join our voices together, and we sing now together. thank you for your generosity to me today, your generosity to one another in being here. And I offer these words: go in peace, to live fully, to love wastefully, and have the courage to be who you were made to be, and all of it. Amen.